Hey guys, welcome to TCR. Today we are making some really yummy cinnamon rolls and I'm going to show you my favorite tried and true recipe for making them.
Are you sure it's true?
Okay guys, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take 2 cups of flour, all-purpose flour, and I'm going to add 1 packet of just regular active dry yeast. I'm just going to stick that off to the side. We're going to use that in a little bit. But I'm going to take a cup of milk over here onto the stove. I'm going to add 1/3 of a cup of sugar and 1/3 of a cup of butter. And we're going to heat this up with a little bit of salt, just a 1/2 teaspoon of salt, until it's until the butter is almost melted. And for those of you that like to keep an eye on temperature, it's going to be right around 120 degrees or so. So now I've got my milk, butter, sugar, and salt mixture where the butter is almost completely melted. And I'm going to go ahead and add that to my dry mixture of the 2 cups of flour and the active yeast. And I'm going to mix it here for about 30 seconds. And I'm also going to add my 2 eggs to that mixture. And I'm going to beat that all together for 30 seconds. I'm going to beat it for about 30 seconds on medium. Then I'm going to just kind of scrape the sides just to make sure everything's kind of, no flour or yeast or anything is stuck to the sides. Then I'm going to beat it for 3 minutes in the mixer. 3 minutes. And just like that, it was 3 minutes. I'm going to scrape as much of this out of my beater as I can. That's the fun part about dough stuck in this beater, because essentially it's kind of runny dough right now. It's a little tricky to get out, but I will persevere, Spartan! So we'll get that out of there as best we can. And I'm going to go let this soak in the sink so that while this is rising, I can make my icing. So the rest of my flour here, it's another like 2.5 cups. I'm going to try to mix in as much of that as I can with a wooden spoon into my bowl. Kind of slowly but surely mixing it in, just a little bit at a time. Because it's going to become more dough-like, and it's, if you've ever worked with dough before, it's a little bit more challenging when you're doing anything but bread dough. Well, bread dough has its own challenges, as Mike will tell you, because he's gotten really into making different kinds of breads, but baking doughs sort of have a mind of their own. So I'm going to try to mix in as much of this as I can with my wooden spoon that I sometimes use to beat Frankie with, don't I? Just kidding, I don't do that. She's my assistant / camera woman today.
Yeah.
Yeah. She's currently sitting on the floor behind the camera because she's given up on life. She's like, I'm over it, whatever. That's about all that's going to mix in, which is about normal. So I've got close to about I'd say about 1/3 to 1/2 cup left. So the next thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to be turning the dough on my lovely little silicone old school Tupperware mat. I'm going to flour it first, and I'm going to use some of this flour that I have here. I'm going to flour this section a little bit so that I can get ready to turn my dough. Frankie's going to help me with this part in just a second. And after we get this all mixed and kneaded and turned into a ball, we are going to put it in this greased bowl that I have next to us, turn it once around in the grease. I'm going to cover it, and I'm going to stick it in the oven, which is not on, but I like to use the oven as kind of a dry, warm place. Just to kind of stick the dough aside to let it rise. Actually, the house is pretty warm today because I had a fire going most of the day. So Frankie, I'm just going to mix in the initial flour here and get it started. Then I'm going to let you knead the dough, okay?
You do other stuff.
Yeah. You're going to do this for about 3 to 5 minutes. The dough should be soft and somewhat elastic when you're working with it, and just kind of mixing it in as best you can.
I mean, not that this won't be a mess in
No.
the end.
Well, it's funny because I think it was the Christmas cake video, somebody was like, how do you stay so clean when you're working with flour? Well, generally, I don't if I'm having to knead it and mix it like this, but that's a very neat, quick recipe. And this one is definitely more hands-on. All right, kiddo, I'll let you turn that for a minute.
Okey-dokey. You go figure out your life.
One thing you don't want to do is overwork your dough. When it starts, if it starts to kind of lose its elasticity or kind of break apart, that's a bad sign. So you want to make sure that you stop before then, and the dough should still be warm, warm to the touch. So I'm just going to form a ball here, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it in this bowl that's been greased, and I'm going to cover it. I'm going to actually stick a warm bowl of water underneath it and cover it to really kind of keep it warm in there for the next hour. So while my dough is rising with a nice warm bowl of water underneath it and a towel draped over it for the next hour, I'm going to make what I like to refer to as the innards, which is the best part of the cinnamon roll, that buttery, sugary, cinnamony goodness that gets all inside the dough. This is part of what sets my cinnamon rolls apart from, well, everybody else's, because I like them to be really, really packed full. So I make a much larger batch. No, I'm not going to make it as big as this jar, but I like to do it in a big container so that I can really stir up the mixture really, really well. So I'm going to dump a bunch of sugar. The other thing is, it's okay if there's leftovers because it doesn't go bad. I just put it in a mason jar, leave it in the cupboard, and the next time I need it for this recipe or another dessert recipe, I got a nice batch of cinnamon and sugar mixed. So I like to use some granulated cane sugar. And I do this all by just sight, but I know I use a lot more than the average bear. I like to mix in some light brown sugar, which is almost, I think, I've never seen it in a cinnamon roll recipe. And then, of course, you need a lot of cinnamon. Secret weapons, which is nutmeg. A lot of nutmeg. And a lot. I also like to add a bunch of ground cloves. Like a lot. Trust me. This last one that I'm putting in here is pumpkin pie spice. This one I love, and it just kind of kicks it up that extra notch. It just really knocks your cinnamon rolls out of the park. So it's sort of my little secret trifecta of the nutmeg, the ground cloves, and the pumpkin pie spice. Just sort of the trifecta there to just kick it up a notch. The nice thing about doing this in a jar, put on the lid. This will also help break up your brown sugar. Makes your life a little bit easier. You can check the color and get it really thoroughly mixed. And it's looking good, kind of right off the bat, but I am going to add a little bit more sugar.
If you were to taste that, and let's say it was just cinnamon and sugar, it'd be like the cinnamon challenge.
Yeah, and then we'd all die.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just going to mix this up some more. Yeah. You want to smell it, baby? Frankie's like, I got to smell it. Yeah. So, and then whatever I don't use on this batch or this season, I'll just store it in a mason jar in the cupboard, and it's one less thing I have to do next time I go to bake it. Let's move on to making some frosting, my special frosting. So we're sifting through some powdered sugar right now. I'm starting out with about 5 cups. My recipe that I like to do for my frosting, my icing, is kind of a hybrid between buttercream and icing. So it's not a full like recipe one way or the other, but it does have butter in it, it does have milk in it, and it does have, of course, sugar and some vanilla. And I like to do it kind of by sight, and you'll see what I mean here as we get going. So Frankie was nice enough to sift that for me. Thank you, Dolly. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take about 1.5 sticks of butter, and I'm going to put it into my mixer here, and I'm going to let it fluff up. I'm going to cut it into just slightly smaller chunks, just because if you throw it in there as a big wad, it's going to be a little bit, you know, a little challenging for your beater. And I'm just going to mix this until it's nice and fluffy and the butter is a little bit kind of aerated. I'm going to go ahead and add in about 2 cups of my sifted powdered sugar while it's mixing. While that's mixing, I'm going to slowly add in some milk. It's going to be somewhere probably around about between a 1/4 to 1/2 cup of milk, depending on how the consistency is coming along. I like to kind of eyeball it. I'm also going to put a little bit of vanilla extract in there, somewhere between 1/2 teaspoon to 1 teaspoon. At this point, I'm going to start adding the remaining sugar into this mixture, and I might have to adjust the milk a little bit. Now at this point, I'm going to go ahead and stir it, scrape the sides a bit here, because there's still a little bit of sugar mixed up on it gets kind of stuck up on the sides, but I'll tell you what, it's almost perfect. And it's a little bit, as you can see, you want it this consistency. You want it kind of between a frosting and an icing. That's what makes it amazing. And I know most people do either like a cream cheese frosting or like a true icing on their cinnamon rolls. But one of the things that people always say when they have my cinnamon rolls for the first time is, oh my God, this is amazing. This is the best frosting I've ever had on a cinnamon roll. And can I have the recipe because these are the best cinnamon rolls I've ever had. So you guys, just between us, I'm sharing the recipe with you. There is only like one other person, my friend Tina, who I have showed how to make these, and my child.
Now about 1,000 people on Earth know.
But now all you guys out there know, but just shh, don't tell anybody.
Don't take all the credit.
I'm going to mix it for a little bit longer just to get the rest of that I scraped off really fully mixed in. One of the unique things about my cinnamon rolls is that I make them the night before into dough form with the filling, but I don't pop them in the oven until that next morning. But Frankie now gets to go crazy.
Yay!
And lick the bowl and take my hand with her, apparently.
Yay!
Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and stick this in the fridge until tomorrow morning. I'm going to go ahead and check on my dough, just make sure it's rising properly, see if I need to add new hot water underneath it, and we'll be ready to rock and roll here soon. So it's been an hour since I put my dough covered in there to rise, and it's risen nicely, which is perfect timing because I need to put my barley recipe into the oven. So I've got that oven coming up to temp, and I'm just gonna, don't mind me, but it looks good. I'm trying it out. If this turns out well, I'll do a video. This is my first time making any kind of barley dish, so we shall see how it goes. But anyway, back to our regularly scheduled programming. We're gonna go ahead and turn this on a floured surface now and kind of punch down the air a little bit. And then we're gonna let it rest for another 10 minutes after we divide it in two. Pinch it in the middle. And I'm gonna make 2 separate little stacks with it. And then I'm gonna let it sit and rest for 10 more minutes. Meanwhile, most recipes will call for you to do this in like a 9x13 pan or on a cookie sheet or something like that. I don't do it that way. Here's how I do it. I use a pie tin. So one batch is usually about 1 pie tin. Don't come out separate. They're pinwheeled within a pinwheel. You'll see what I mean in a bit. So we're gonna wait 10 more minutes while that dough figures out its life, and then it's on to phase 2. Well, actually we're on like phase 4 right now, but we're gonna call it phase 2 because it sounds better. All right, guys, so while that was doing its last final 10-minute rest after I divided the dough, I went ahead and took what ended up being almost a cup of butter and melted it because we need that for the filling. I've got these 2 things of dough here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flatten these out, and you can use a rolling pin. I prefer to do it by hand. And you're going to kind of make them a little bit elongated rectangles is sort of what you're going for, all right? And you're going to want to have a straight edge knife handy for this next part as well, not serrated. So I've got my butter, I've got my mixture that I made earlier of cinnamon, sugar, nutmeg, clove, and pumpkin spice. And I'm going to pour some of that out into a bowl just for easier access here. We're going to take this butter and I'm going to brush the entire inside of this little rectangle guy. I'm going to brush the entire inside with butter. A pretty good heaping amount of it. Then I'm going to do my first pass of my cinnamon and sugar mixture. Notice how I said first pass. This is part of what makes these things so amazing. I do a few of these passes. Now I'm going to drizzle butter back over the top of this. Just like so. Really cover it. This is what sets this apart. Trust me. I'm a doctor. No, I'm not, but anyway, trust me anyway. So now I'm going to roll this, and I'm going to kind of pull it as I roll it and kind of help keep that shape as I roll it and kind of pull it out. So as I'm rolling it, sort of pulling it out a little bit, kind of helps keep it nice and consistent. This is the first round. They got double filled. They put the butter, the cinnamon, sugar, plus seasonings mixture on the inside, and then drizzled butter back over the top. That helps them really get that crusty, good stuff going. You know how when you get a cinnamon roll that's got that little extra bit of crust? That's what that is. It's that extra butter on top of that cinnamon and sugar making that kind of crust. And man, is it good. So now, we're not done though. We're gonna take the rest of this butter and we're gonna drizzle this over the top. I'm gonna make sure that I cover the top of every single one of these bad boys. Every little nook and cranny. This is what sets these bad boys apart, I'm telling you. It's the extra butter and the extra layer like this of your cinnamon and sugar. And I literally just keep doing this until I run out of butter. Like, I just drizzle over the top again so that there's as little dry powder on it as possible. Now I'm going to cover this and I'm going to let it sit in the fridge overnight. Tomorrow morning, with about 2 hours before I bake this, I'm going to pull it out and let it sit on the counter and come up to temp, and it'll rise a little bit more. You can make these in the same day. I can pop them in the oven right now, but it's better if you let them sit overnight. The flavor really soaks into the dough will rise again, like it just gives them that extra edge. Like, plus then you get fresh cinnamon rolls in the morning and you didn't have to get up at midnight to try to make them. Guys, I'm gonna go ahead and throw this in the oven now. And I'm gonna set my timer for 20 minutes and then we're gonna check it and see where we're at. Okay. Oh, they're looking good. Coming on. So here they are out of the oven. Looking yummy. I've made Mike a second pot of coffee because he needs it.
Yeah, it's not really a pot, it's like a...
Well, it's another French press of coffee.
It's a carafe of coffee.
A carafe of coffee. It's like a spot of tea. So now that these are out of the oven, and they are looking fabulous. It's time to put some frosting on these bad boys. So let's do it. So while these were sitting on the counter rising before I stuck them in the oven for a couple of hours, I also took the frosting out, of course, and set it on the counter. Now it's time to start layering that frosting on. And I don't spread it, I just let it melt onto these when they're pretty fresh out of the oven. And I do a couple layers of it.
Frankie's running through the smoke in the house because Mom spilled butter in the oven.
Yeah. We all know what butter likes to do.
It's fun.
We've got our de-smoking system set up.
It's called a fan.
So there you have it, guys. These are the best cinnamon rolls you'll ever have and the best frosting, ooey gooey stuff to make around the holidays. Yummy, yummy, yummy good stuff.
Thank you for watching. Hit the like and subscribe button, hit that little bell so that you can get all the notifications.